to have you. Nigeria joins the list of countries in the African Continental Free Trade Area after President Buhari signed the agreement in Niamey, the Niger Republic. A president of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, says the Continental Free Trade Zone, if successful, would unite 1.3 billion people, create a $3.4 trillion economic bloc, and usher a new era of development.
A dream, an old dream, is coming true. Since the inaugural summit of the Organization of African Unity in May 1963, the African Continental Free Trade Area that we are launching today is one of the most emblematic projects on the African agenda. The founding fathers will certainly be proud of it. Barely a year later, the number of signatures has risen to 52, and with the signatures of Benin and Nigeria just now, we are at 54 out of 55, so almost all the members of our union. With the latest instruments handed over, we have also recorded 27 ratifications.
Signing process there by Nigeria in Niamey, Niger. And analyst Victor Okah joins me in the studio to discuss this latest development. Victor, it's always a pleasure to have you. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about the significance of Nigeria signing, finally, the Free Trade Agreement Pact, and why. What do you make of it?
Well, it is quite significant. It was good we held back initially, but it was also important that we got it on board earlier. I mean, if we have any concerns, the best way to drive your concerns is to be within the space. You can't fight from outside. You can't drive any change from outside. So it was important, but it was also good that we had to, hold back a bit.
Yeah.
And it helps in negotiation as well, because if Nigeria is not a part of it, then you're losing about a fifth or a sixth of this huge market. It's a very significant market. So, but eventually we've been able to do that, and there are many implications for us as a country. And one way I'd like to illustrate and let people know, is if you look at, I use Nigeria as an example. Nigeria could have been several countries, and you know that. Lagos is today about the fourth or fifth largest economy on the continent.
Yeah.
Now, that would ordinarily not have been possible, but for the custom barriers that have been broken across the 36 states. There's no custom boundaries, so to say. And so you have a lot of factories in Ogun State, in Lagos State, you understand? And they have this huge market of about 200 million people. And so it's easy to rise and be, for Lagos to be bigger than Ghana's economy, bigger than the Gambian economy. You understand what I'm saying? And so what it does for us, yes, we're right to have the fear. I mean, we have a population, people might say, okay, to want to take advantage, but look at the other side. We have about 1.2 billion Africans.
Indeed. And
Nigerians are very enterprising. You know that wherever we go, we just literally, because we're born hustlers. I say so in a very positive sense. Nigerians are not laid back. You can tell a Nigerian, as soon as he walks into a place, there's a certain aura about him, exactly. And so when we get into anywhere, we dominate, which is the reason why you get this so-called xenophobic attacks. And because we get into a place and we just take over. And so I have no fear about what benefits are going to come towards where our youth are very well educated, better than most African countries. And even if not in percentage, but certainly in numbers.
Indeed. And
we can push these numbers into the continent. We have people in the technology space. We have the richest man in Africa today is Nigerian. And I recall him saying, moving somewhere, he just got an AU passport. But before then, he needed visas to go. But he can now go on his expansionist drive. And I do know that there are African countries who would rather have fellow Africans invest in their economy than to have the Chinese, the Americans, because the Africans would have your interests more than the Western powers. And another advantage is it will break the stronghold of the French over the Francophone countries. You know that they signed away, if you like, their destiny a very long time ago. Many of them are not very happy about it. And when leaders rise up and try to go against it, some sort of coups engineered from wherever take place, and then they get toppled over because they are challenging certain vested interests.
Indeed.
But if Africa rises as one, and we're talking about Africa rising now, if Africa rises as one, as we're doing now, then there's no stopping us. Benefits are, I mean, it's very obvious. If you look at Europe, the Eurozone and the European Union, you can see that obviously there are lots of benefits from there. America is what it is because of the huge, it's a confederation, so many what could have been smaller countries. California is about, like Lagos, about fifth largest economy in the world.
Indeed.
You know, and so when you look at that, America is what it is today because it's huge. There's a huge market. You know, you don't need to go outside of America, which is why Americans can go from one state to another and say they've been around the world. You know, so
Indeed, Victor. Now, let's look at, you know, irrespective of definitely a homegrown solution to an obvious problem. And I was even going to ask you whether it was justified, but you know, with the cautious approach by Nigeria. But be that as it may, there will be challenges. So
Obviously,
which ones do you envisage will be of primary concern?
Well, again, I like to draw my analogies from trends and what has happened in the past. You know, the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme or program of West Africa has suffered a bit, you know, because, you know, it's not easy. Many of our manufacturers can't really get their goods into some of these West African countries in spite of the agreements and all of that. So sometimes you might find a bit of this resistance. But I'm hoping that with the spirit with which the African Union is driving this, I do not envisage too much problem. But you will see that resistance initially. At the local level, you might find among locals a threat that certain people are coming to take over their jobs. So you might find that initially, and so on. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I read something recently about a trade delegation to the Gambia where they said Nigerians should come. There's land available. They are ready to, you know, give land, you know, come in there tax-free and all of that. So and so when that happens, that's a policy from government. But at the local level, you need to also let the people know that ultimately this is going to be for their good. It's going to, you know, grow the economy. It's going to create more jobs and all of that. And so if there's no proper education, then you might have pockets of resistance. It's natural. And so it behoves every country to not only buy into it and ratify it, because I hope you know that joining is one thing, but you have to ratify it locally. You know, and so after ratification, then the next phase would be for these individual countries to do some sort of analysis. I mean, sorry, enlightenment, and let their people know about the opportunities. And so to say to them that, look, if things aren't working out here, perhaps if you go to a new environment, have a change of, you know, environment, things might get better for you. Perhaps the skills that you have that are underutilized. See, I mean, for instance, you're in one of the smaller countries, you may have read an exotic course that is not so relevant locally, but you might come to Nigeria and find relevance. Okay, if you read petroleum in Niger or Chad, for instance, it's not relevant. But with this, for instance, you can come to Nigeria and there'll be a market for your service. You know, there's a protocol on service, protocol on trade, and then of what you call it now, the third one is dispute resolution as well. So all of this is being taken care of.
Indeed. Now, what becomes of sub-regional trade blocs like the ECOWAS, the EAC, SADC, IGAD, you know, as well? You know, how will they harmonize their positions with the AU's?
Well, the thing is, these are all sub-regional economic and political blocs that are members as well of the AU. And so whatever the AU decides is like local legislation has to fall in line with, you know, whatever. If there's any treaty, for instance, you have signed internationally, you look, which is why the issue of even ratification is coming in. So if you have a buy-in at the local level, at every country, it therefore follows that at the regional level, it will be adopted. Because remember, there's the AU Parliament, there's also the sub-regional parliaments as well. So I expect that this will be tabled in some sort of ratification. Either it will be accepted at national level, that we considered enough, or at the sub-regional level. I don't see a problem. I see instead that at these sub-regional levels, obviously we're not going to be having one currency, not yet, but at the sub-regional levels, like, in West Africa, for instance, we're moving towards the ECO. And by the way, I named the ECO in a competition. No, I'm serious. I'm not joking.
Okay.
I named it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So years ago. So you're going to find that, okay, so that's going to happen. Right. I mean, obviously, the cost of exchange of money at the sub-regional level will be like zero, but you still need to do it across the various regions. So some of that will be there, but I think over time, we'll get to Gaddafi's utopia.
Indeed. Now, should Nigeria feel the need to pull out of this agreement, can this be done without rancor?
I don't see any reason for it right now, but as with every agreement, there are conditions for getting in and conditions for getting out. Brexit, for instance, is an example.
That's exactly where I'm going.
You see, so the issue of Brexit, if you notice, the rancor is both within and not so much without.
All right.
Not so much without. I mean, yes, there are implications. Europe obviously is not happy to have Britain leave, but you cannot leave on your own terms. You have to leave based on the conditions, and you cannot eat your cake and have it as Britain is trying to do. Right. And so the bigger problem is at the local level for the UK. Yes. Some are for it and some are not for it. And so you've got to be able to deal with that first. If your people are all for it, then you'll be able to meet whatever conditions are laid out as at the time of getting it. There's always an exit clause, so it will be there. And the issue of rancor is neither here nor there for now. It depends on the country's peculiar experience from it. But in the end, yes, if you're the only one out of it, I don't know how favorable that's going to be, especially now that everyone, which is why it was good that Nigeria jumped in quickly enough in order to be able to influence things. And notice, Niger, we contributed so many vehicles and so many things to make it, so it was like we're entering in a very big way, still trying to act like the big brother so that we can have a bit of influence. It is important that you have a voice. Like I said, if you're not in the parlor when decisions are being taken about you, then whatever is said is binding on you. So it's important that you're there to state your case, which is what we are doing right now. And hopefully, I'm sure in the time that we were not a part of it, we would have been doing some sort of negotiation. People would have wondered, oh, big brother, what's happening? Why now? And all that. So no, don't worry. Are these your fears? We can take care of it. Of course, the committee did its work as well. They would have looked at it, looked at the pros and cons, and decided that probably the pros are much more than the cons.
Indeed, and in 30 seconds, do you think we as Africans, yes, we're following a model here, but have we learned of the complexities of other international trade blocs like the EU?
Well, I think we have, because we've had the opportunity of studying and seeing what's happened in these other. What I worry about is it shouldn't really be a problem. I would have said maybe cultural difference, but remember, we had a common union years ago. We had the cowrie, we traded in salts and all of that. We had intra-African trade, so it's like going back to where we were in a couple of centuries ago. So
all right, very good. And on that note, Victor Okah, public affairs analyst, I'd like to thank you very much for your thoughts on the African Free Trade Agreement. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.